So sorry for being late. Uh, I invite you for a silent word of prayer. Amen. So in our last meeting, uh, we had a discussion here that I didn't complete. So I had asked two questions. What and when? So we wanted to understand, when is the Sunday law? What is the Sunday law? So that's the last study that we had done together. I didn't have time to finish it. I hope today we'll have more time to deal with it. So, and some of the concepts that we are trying to understand, we wanted to know whether the Sunday law is one, is it a point? Two, is it a what? A period. And as we also looked upon these two concepts, we also asked ourselves another important question. What is the marker for the Sunday law? So I'm just trying to refresh our mindset in what we did in our last class. So I gave us a few quotes from Ellen White. I think I can list some of them. So we were able to read 40 to 51.1. So we were also able to read SPM 1.4, Spalding and Morgan. We were also able to read GC 592, I think paragraph 3. And all these quotes, we saw that they are trying to insinuate, as Ellen White puts it, that the Sunday law is being marked by what? A decree. And she speaks of a union of church and state, and the church, using the powers of the state, will enforce an oppressive decree. I would call it a religious decree. So when you look at Ellen White's mindset, she's oriented to the issue of Sunday Sabbath. So she thinks the nation of the United States of America will pass a decree. It is a religious one because it is being propagated by the church. And because the church uses the powers of the state, when the decree goes forth, that's when we know that we are in the history of the Sunday law. And I think this is what almost all of us have been having since Elder Jeff reinforced the same mindset in the time of DN magazine. So we were also able to look at events. So we were also able to list events associated with the Sunday law. So, and I listed books and the events. So today I'm not going to list the books because I'm just doing a recap. Or if let me just list the events. So the first one, we spoke of a decree. So that's one of the events we have associated with the Sunday law. So we also spoke about the mark of the beast. That's another event. You can also speak about the image of the beast. So the fourth event, we spoke of the union of church and state coming together. We spoke of persecution of God's people. We also spoke of the time of trouble. So, and I think I was able to clarify that we have two times of trouble. So the quote that we were able to read, we were able to see if this is the Sunday law and this is the close of probation, this period here, I mean, not this one, Sunday law, close of probation, second advent, this period here, it's called the literal time of trouble. And this is what we call the great time of So this is what we also call Jacob's time of trouble. So Ellen White says there is some trouble which is happening at this dispensation before the close of probation. So we also spoke of the latter rain. We also spoke of the work of salvation, the work of the third angel, which is the work of sealing. We also spoke about public evangelism. So we also spoke about investigative judgment. We also listed the mighty angel of Revelation, the angel of Revelation 18, and then we spoke of the deadly wound. We also spoke of the rise of the seventh kingdom. Sorry. We spoke of which number do we go next? Yes? XIV. XIV. Oh yeah. So we also spoke of the concept of lamb to dragon. We also spoke of XV, right? We also spoke of shipwreck. Let me just say, the reason why I'm relisting this because I re-emphasized, if at all we need to understand this dispensation, where we stand in history, this is where we are in history. We are in this dispensation, and we had prophetic models based on histories and let me just say studies that were done that were able to show that these are some of the events we expect to see fulfilled in this history. And what I was emphasizing was we need to go back and revisit these studies for us to actually understand how these events look like in this dispensation. And the reason why this is important, I was able to just point out some of them. The issue of the decree. If this is what we understood to be the marker of this event, and we are having a different concept, then it tells us even these other events, maybe the way we understood them is not the way we expect them to see fulfilled. And they might get fulfilled without our awareness because we have been biased by what Ellen White gives us on the table. Yet, it's a different perspective. You speak about the concept of church and state, another problem that we have. So we think that we must have a religious entity that controls the state power for them to enact something. What we are realizing here, what is being marked as the aspect of the church is not actually a religious entity. It must not be a religious entity. You come to the issue of the deadly wound. Again, the perspective in which we thought the deadly wound looks like here is different. Come to the issue of persecution. Come to the issue of public evangelism. You can actually begin to see when you begin looking at every concept, we are being challenged. The issue of how the dragon looks like, how shipwreck looks like, these are some of the events that we really need to revisit and ask ourselves, how do they look like in this dispensation? So on that specific issue that I was looking at, I was able to deal with this, the issue of the decree. So I first dealt with the issue of the decree. With time, maybe we'll have time to look at the rest. So, and when it came to the issue of the decree, what we came to a realization is that we have made a shift. So, and the shift is from the aspect of seeing a decree to the issue dealing with election. So, we have many teachers who are trying to juggle what this waymark is, but none of them is saying that this event will be marked by an issue to do with passing a law. They are saying this one might be either July RNC election nominations, might be November 5, the people's vote, or might be December 19, the electoral college vote. It's all dealing with elections. So, and we wanted to understand, why are we making this shift? Where did this idea come from? Are we together? So, and this took us to Q, F, M, G. And we saw, when you come to this concept, which was first taught by Elder Terry, Quintus gave us 5-7. This is the 5th month, but when Julius changes the calendar, it becomes the 7th month. So it gives us the aspect of the 7th month. And this month, which is the 7th month, becomes July. Then Fabius, which is the Faber beans, which were the beans used in casting lots or voting, gives us the aspect of voting. And this was seen to be a compound word, maximum flood. And we say this one is a concept that we have understood for so long in the movement, the aspect of the king of the north behavior in this Sunday law history. He enters like a flood. And I think we read a quote. Where is it? Yes, Isaiah chapter 7. So, Isaiah chapter 7 and 8, which speaks about Assyria, the king of the north, entering the glorious land like a maximum flood. So it's the same language in Daniel 11, verse 41. And there are many others that you can go to. You can also go to Revelation 12, the flood, which marks the beginning of the toll of 60, the period of the wilderness, which is also a history that you can associate with this dispensation. So this is the first testimony that we get that tries to mark this event. And what Quintus does is that it points us to a particular time of the year. I think we're able to establish that. The 5th month, based on the old calendar, and the 7th month, based on the Julian calendar. So, and just to put this to thought, is it a legitimate aspect? Because when you come to Elder Tess, she's more going to deal with this perspective. During the Being a Crime message, Elder Tess will be able to coin this character at the Sunday Law Waymark. This is the year 272 BC, when the Romans accept the Egyptians' diplomacy, and the delegation that is sent to Egypt is led by Quintus Fabius Maximum Judges. So Elder Tess focuses more on these two terms because it was easier to associate this term with what we understood as the flood. Then, when Elder Terry comes in 2024, she's going to focus more on what Elder Tess didn't bother to deal with. She didn't interpret what Quintus meant or Fabius meant. She was more focused on this, which is interesting because it's a thought that we already had to see maximum flood, which is like the overflowing scones. So, and when Elder Terry comes to focus on this, she's able to link us to the Roman nomenclature. And another concept she's going to use is the issue of calendation. Fifth month, old calendar. Seventh month, new calendar. Is this a new concept or it's a concept you've been used to in the movement? Isabella, what do you think? Why is it not new? Do you have an evidence why it's not new or a concept that you formally knew about issues of dealing with calendars in the movement? From? Okay. So, okay, let me not let me just explain it for you. So, when you go to the Millerite history, so this is the first history that I know of who used calendation because they have a time prophecy, 2,300 days. And they are coming to a realization that when this prophecy was given to Daniel in Daniel 8, it was given under the reckoning of the what? The Jewish calendar. Are we together? And so, if they need to make calculations, they cannot directly make calculations because already they live under a new calendation, the Gregorian calendar. So what will they do? Actually, they are going to make progressive shifts because Miller was the first character after identifying this that he needs to do calendar overlayment. The first calendation that he's going to use is the rabbinical calendar, which is not so correct because this is not based on barley harvest. Associates like Sylvester Bliss, Southern, is it Southern what? Can't remember all the names. Miller's associates, even before the exact date Miller had predicted as the end of the 2300 days, make a shift. They shift from the rabbinical calendar, and what do they go to? The Karaite calendar. So they are overlaying first the rabbinical over the Gregorian. Now they shift from the Gregorian and go to the rabbinical over the Gregorian. So you're going to see the Karaite calendar overlaid over the Gregorian, and this is what we'll try to project April 19 as 18 as the end of the 2300 days. The same calendar Snow will use to project October 22nd. So the Millerites are the first to deal with the issue of calendation. And you are going to perfectly understand this when you look at Ezra 7:9. So the other person who will still take the same concept is Elder Tess. And where does Elder Tess use the issue of calendation? RISPA. No idea. Wangi? Okay, no one.
Idea was those numbers people are pointing to was UP 2019.
Numbers. But the prophetic time spans.
Yeah, one houses.
Were those based on calendation?
I think the revolutions.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Revolutions. So when you come to revolutions, she's going to mark November 9. But when you go to most of the histories, go to the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. There is the first calendar, the revolutionary calendar, and the new calendar. So unless you overlay the calendars, you cannot see November 9, right? There's also the French Revolution, when they adopt a different calendar with 10 days a week. So you need to overlay again the two calendars for you to see November 9. So there is the issue of dealing with calendation. You can see two testimonies. So it's not a new phenomenon that Elder Terry is doing by going to the issue of calendation to come up with a man. So that's the first thing I wanted us to see. So after going to Quintus, which gives us a particular time of the year, specifically month, July, we come to Fabius. And Fabius points us to an election process. Voting. So, and again, the issue of voting was not a new thing. I think in my last class, I tried to explain how we begin to see the issue of voting as a significant event. It is the year 2020. And we have two presenters. The first one is Elder Tess, who brings the issue of elections to our attention as a significant subject. And the other person who brings this to more clarity is Elder Paminda. So how does Elder Tess bring the issue to our attention? For so long, we have overlooked the external events in the Millerite history because even them themselves were not so bothered with the external events. So when Elder Tess comes in this dispensation, the event increase of knowledge after 2019, she will revisit the external events in the Millerite history, and she's going to mark how many elections in the Millerite history which were significant. How many? She marks events which are a combination of 4-3. Let me give you the hint. Elections and tariffs, or compromises. Let me put it that way. So she's going to mark 3 compromises and how many elections? 4 elections. And she tells us that the Millerites were required to have understood these 4 elections, which were explicitly dealing with the issue at hand. Specifically, the 1844 election, which would have opened their eyes to see was like the earnest of what would come in 1850. The election was between Plonk and who? 1844. And Clay. And who won the election? It's Paul. What was the issue? It was all about annexation. So if they had understood which side to orient to because of the issue at hand, the election was not just those 2 characters, but what they actually represented. So NLPS brings the issue of election as a significant subject. And the second aspect is the same time Elder Pamina is dealing with the issue of voting. I think there was a series of classes. It was the studies, freedom is not voluntarily given by the oppressor. That era, and there was also the issue of Acts 27, life and death message. That era, Elder Pamina is going to do the issue of voting. Personal is political. And she's going to tell us that our personal decisions, personal opinions, personal ideas are going to influence the society. They are political. And in the same way, political and societal issues will do what? Will affect us. And he's going to Ellen White quotes and the pioneer writings trying to show, one, where Ellen White discourages the issue of voting, is against it, and again, compares it with quotes where even Ellen White endorsed the issue of voting because the issue being agitated required what? The quote says that voting was like a religious duty. And one of the examples, I don't know whether it's Texas or can't remember the exact state, where James White and the rest are trying to persuade the church to have a vote because the one they want to elect is someone who wants to fight alcohol and tobacco. And so they are suggesting if we vote this character and he is going to eradicate a problem we have, it's a religious duty that we are performing. Are we together? And so from then, we begin to understand the issue of voting as significant. So when we bring out the issue again here, it's not a new thing. It's something that we had already established into our mindset, and maybe many more other studies that have been given. And I think I've explained about the maximum flood, where we get the concept of the maximum flood. So, which points us to a symbol for the Sunday law, maximum flood law or the overflowing scourge. So this is what we were able to deal with in our first class. I may not have reviewed everything, but I hope now we have refreshed our mindset. So, and I tried to emphasize and explain how for so long we have expected a decree, an issue that deals with a law, be it oppressive in a way. And when that decree is passed, the mindset was we have arrived to this event. And what we are now seeing is a different concept, because if you basically go by this, because this is where the issue of election is brought to our attention as a marker for this, people will begin to have different thoughts, where someone will say, okay, I see July, but what is the connection between July and an election? And the only election seen in July is only a Republican election, where they nominate candidates for presidency. Someone feels this might be a minor event based on the weight that we think at the back of our minds. This is one of the most important and major events. So rather than going to July, maybe we should look at November, which is the general election. But now there is a problem with that. How do you harmonize? Because if you put this election to be November, you destroy this symbol called Quintus, because it only points you to the seventh month. Or when you go to December 19, the election, you still don't have a way to discard this. If you factor in this and you want to say, this is July, this is November, so this is progression, then you need to show that the marker for and the symbol for the Sunday law is future. So it brings a lot of loopholes and confusion when you start factoring other dates, which maybe people thought had more weight than July itself. And so we now go into a mess. We don't know what is the marker for the Sunday law. We have many teachers, and each is given a chance to do what? To prove the case. And we are given a chance also to put to scrutiny what they bring on board. And I think people had a chance to interact with all those teachers. So my point was, I want us to see, based on my study, why there is more weight on understanding this concept. Because after giving this, it was suggested, okay, you mark July, which is a Republican event, and it's the election in the Republican event, and you mark this as the Sunday law. What is the second testimony? So a second testimony is given. And what is the second testimony given? So Elder Terry goes to 2014. And is able to show that this is a period of 10 years And something began in 2014. So 2014 is a Sunday law for the priests. So she's marking 2024, July 18, as the Sunday law. So what are the events that enabled us to mark 2014 as the Sunday law? Lena, one event. So event number one is the purging of the Republican Party. I forgot your name. Griffins. Give us another event. Faith. Yes? Which election? Yes? You don't know which election. General election. Yeah? You know there was an election, but you don't know which one. Ken, unajua your election? It's midterm election. So you can mark midterm election. Another event into a diaspora. Yes? Itao. I'm doing these events. Zenezi mark 2014 as the Sunday law. Please. Yes? This person I've been forgetting his name, but he blocked from our phone. It's Mitch. Mitch. Is going to block the appointment of the guest. There's another one. Yes? Yes? There's Gamergate. Another one. There are more than 10. Hobby Lobby. Another one. The Heroes Act. etc. etc. Repam, all those. But I want to sift out a few. Maybe you can go with those. And the most prominent ones that we dealt with more was this one and this one, and maybe this one. Others are also important. So when you look at the issue of purging of the Republican Party and the appointment of judges, why was that significant? What we needed to understand is that this one was the work of what? Was the work of what? Organization. There is a movement, whether you want to call it MAGA, and the movement realizes we cannot achieve our objective when we have centrists and moderates. We need to deal with this problem. So, and what they begin is to reform a vehicle that they think can be able to achieve their goals. And this is where we begin to have the reform of the Republican Party. So, and what you have is the triumvirate. Who are they? You did.
Miller.
So you have Steve Miller. Another one.
Ban-
Steve Bannon. The last. Chagua mtu akusaidie. Yeah, it's Jeff Sessions. So they have a work to do to organize and reform the party. And you also have another character you don't need to forget, who, as they reform the party, he's also, on the other hand, working to make sure he puts the judiciary in place to suit the ideas and the agendas of the movement. So, and what I want us to see is that when you come to 2014, the work that begins here to reform this movement is the work that is complete here. And what Elder Terry tries to mark is that the event of July 18 is what shows the work is complete. But before you go and see the completion of the work, you need to see how things play about here for us to see the completeness of that work. So, and what she's going to mark, if you expand this history from 2014, I will want to mark 2019. I will want to mark 2021. So if I remember, on my last class, someone asked a question which we didn't answer. Can we go back to other Sunday laws for us to see whether they are dealing with what? This event. Are we together? So if you put the reform line here, so this is 1989, 201. Sunday law, COP, Second Advent. So it's the same for the priests. 1989, 2001, you have 2014, 2019, 2021. For the Levites and for the Nethinims. So this Wemak, this is the Sunday law. So we want to understand this history. And God has given us shadows of the real event. So this is the history we need to focus on. 2014, this is the history of the priests, the Levites, and the Nethinims. So if you go, let me just put it the right way. So 2014, 2001, 19. So what you're going to see is that this is the Wemak Sunday law for the Levites, and this is the Wemak Sunday law for the Nethinims. So if I look at this Sunday law, all these are fractals taking us to the big line. We need to look at the events that we marked. And for us to look at the events, we need to have been able to thread a storyline. So when you come to 2019, I'm magnifying that history there. 2019. Let me even put it from 2014. And then you come to 2019. Then you come to 20. I'm also going to factor in 2020 a bit and 2021. And then you come to 2024. So this is a Sunday law, Sunday law, Sunday law. So when you come to this, the issue that we mark as the major events, there are other events. It's The most prominent one is the purging of the Republican Party. So, and this is what I'm calling the work of organization, the work that begins. They need to put their house in order because actually there is an incoming event, the 2016 election. So when you come to 2019, what event did we mark? What event did we mark in 2019? Yes? Pardon? Okay. So we mark the issue of impeachment. And it's the impeachment of who? So as we speak of the impeachment of Donald Trump, remember we spoke of November 9. And for so long, people are trying to ask, what actually happened in November 9? I think I remember when we began the Vespers classes, I was able to try and demonstrate the events of November 9, 2019. Or for those who have watched some of these presentations in Australia. So you're going to see that when you look at the events of November 9, we would mark Trump as a dictator, and we would also mark the issue of impeachment. This is what Gladys was talking about, the prophetic time spans, the numbers that would tell us what would take place in 2019 using the prophetic numbers. But specifically, when you go to the study of the revolutions, it marks the rise of a dictator because this is the rise of Napoleon. So what we are going to see is that we need to factor in what happened in America in November 9. And the catalyst of this impeachment is what? The phone call. Do you remember? Trump makes a call to who? To the Ukrainian president. You either comply with my demands or I cut off supplies. And there is a whistleblower. This issue agitates the House, and they table in a motion to impeach Donald Trump. Before the impeachment, you're going to see some of the Republican senators. So what you're going to see is that most of the Republican lawmakers are going to condemn what Trump did by trying to use the powers of the executive unlawfully. And the environment at 10, people would think that if it is an impeachment motion, most of them will do what? Would vote to impeach Donald Trump. The same time, there is another connected event. And this is the issue of withdrawing troops. Remember when you come to the Battle of Asculum, 2019 or Rafia, Trump also is fully withdrawing troops in Syria, and also another portion of troops are leaving Afghanistan. And the same lawmakers are also condemning this, trying to criticize Donald Trump for withdrawing troops. I remember one of them. Can't remember, why am I forgetting his name? He's a very prominent senator. Is it? Let me not remember. I'll give you a wrong name. So, there is a lot of tension here in the Republican Party, where for the first time, they demonstrate dissatisfaction with their leader. But come November 9, you know that the impeachment is not on November 9, but the deadline to handing over the resolution of the party is done in November 9. And the exact date, the documentation is handed over to the House, where all Republicans are behind Donald Trump. Even those who had formerly criticized him are behind Donald Trump. And this is what was marked, that Trump has done what we call a takeover. They are still willing to die with him even after evidence. And when the impeachment proceedings are going to take place, none of the Republicans will vote to impeach Donald Trump. And that's how Trump survives in his first term. So even as we come to this event, what were the Nephilims and the Levites required to understand externally? It's an issue that is also dealing with the Republican Party. You come to 2020 and there is an election. The reason why I marked peace, I want us to see this election leading to an event. This is when Elder Tess Marx and Henry Clay the compromise and trying to demonstrate to us how Democrats must compromise for them to win this election. As Henry Clay was the great compromiser, trying to save the Union. His main objective was not to eradicate slavery, but seeing whether they can save the Union from splitting. America is divided, and the Democrats need to act. And they go for Joe Biden as who can unite both some factions in the Republican and some in the Democrat. And this election leads to victory for the Democrats. Joe Biden is elected president. What happens next? The January 6th what? Insurrection. This is Trump. This is the event we mark as 2021. And this is Donald Trump trying to undermine democracy, trying to undermine a democratic process that ousted him out of power, and trying to show that the election was rigged. He's mobilizing an insurrection, trying to raise a coup to take over power by force, which he fails. So this is the event. But you can actually see, when you come to this January 6th insurrection, what lesson does it teach us? It was a work that began of organization, a work of reform. Why will Trump fail in this insurrection? You have characters like Mike Pence, the vice president. In the House, in the Capitol, is it Capitol Mall or what was the name where they stormed? Capitol Hill. The presence of the vice president is required, right? Trump is pushing Pence not to do what? Not to attend, because without Pence, the standard required to meet the handing over of power will not be met. But what will Pence do? He accepts the election's result and is willing to comply with the law. So it's because there are still people who are not one-mind oriented in this history. That's why the election fails. There is a lot of condemnation from even the Republican lawmakers themselves. And Trump has to back off. So again, January 6th is on the process, but it demonstrates to us there is still a problem. And what you're going to see as a result of this, there is an unleashing. The same characters who are active here and guaranteed victory in 2016 are the same characters here who will activate themselves to guarantee what? Victory. And what they unleash is what we call the pressing. See? Is that the spelling? Let me look. Pressing. Yeah. You have the pressing strategy. This is the strategy to make sure they restore Trump to power. This strategy has an agenda. It's another work of reorganization. And what they are going to do, they are going to come with a policy which we call the American First. I don't know whether you have heard of that. It's all centered on an American First. So the leader of this is Steve Miller. You also see Steve Bannon using his own media platform, Breitbart, doing the same work. And number one, they are going to spread propaganda to praise, defend Trump on TV, to propagate MAGA ideas, to show why immigration is a threat, to give clips of how immigrants fight policemen on the borderline, and actually how they even come unlawfully to paint a bad picture to all the Americans on all the agendas that are behind the MAGA movement. They propagate these issues to corrupt the minds of the people, to see why it's necessary to first think about what? America. The same propaganda that was spread here to enable Trump's election. Number two, they also need to build relationships with billionaires. This is where characters like Elon Musk comes in. They need funding. And you know the good work Elon Musk did for Donald Trump. He would actually pay even those who would vote for Donald Trump. So you have the Silicon Valley billionaires and some Republican legislatures. So it's a work of reorganizing and making sure by the time they come to this election, the house is in order. And so what you see now on July the 18th, Elder Terry is able to demonstrate that this organizational work is complete. So the 10-year period that we look from 2014 to 2024, we have always been trading a story dealing with one event, the issue of the Republican Party. So when she marks this, it's just a storyline that she has been trading all along. It's all about connecting the dots and being able to see that it's one event, a work of organization, a movement in progress. And what we were required to see is what the movement is progressively doing to achieve something. So from July 18, they have now the house in order, everything in place, and they begin to do their biddings. So how many minutes? Three. So because I have another class, I'm not mooring. Let me just do a short recap and then we'll proceed to our next class. So when I first had a class, we had this question. What is the Sunday law? When is the Sunday law? Is it a point? Is it a period? We were able to see when you compare the time of the end, 1989, we understand 1989, we would say we are at the time of the end, point, and we are in the time of the end, period. So we went to Daniel 11, verse 40, and we saw how we interact with the concept of period and point. And we saw time of the end can be a point, time of the end can be a period. So when you come to the Sunday law, we need to factor in the same concept, point, period. Number two, we asked ourselves, when we come to this Sunday law, what is the marker for the Sunday law? So we saw that these quotes associate the Sunday law with a decree. For so long, even when we spoke of the executive must be one, we understood we need to have an executive in power, a character who wins the executive to be able to easily pass an oppressive law. And one of the histories that I would give that gives this mindset is the study of looking at the two-horned kingdom in Bible prophecy, the history of Medo-Persia. When you come to the history of Medo-Persia, you go to the book of Daniel, and what do you realize? Darius in Daniel 6 is going to pass an oppressive law. It's a religious law because he requires everyone to worship only the king for a period of 30 days. And that became a good example for us to see. The decree by Darius is the marker for the Sunday law. Nebuchadnezzar, the decree where if you hear the sound of any musical instrument, bow down and worship the image, that was another history. The story of Haman, the Haman's decree to eliminate all the Jewish, another example that was used to show a decree as one of the concepts you expect to see as the Sunday law. All borrowed from Ellen White's mind, going to the Bible, and you have proof after proof after proof showing why we need to see an executive who can pass the law, why we need to see a legislature biased to pass an oppressive law. That has been the mindset. But then we say we are making a shift from a decree to another event. How do we make this shift? And I think you are in details able to show that shift. For today, I just made a summary. It's by going to QFMG, trying to demonstrate how Q gives us a particular time in the year, July. F gives us a process, the election, voting. And this as a compound word gives us one of the markers for the Sunday law, one of the symbols of the Sunday law. maximum flood. So, and then I was able to list events that I say we need to be able to understand these events in their light today. There were studies done before, right from the time of the End magazine, that outlined all the events we expect to see fulfilled in this dispensation. And I'm saying we still have a lot of biases because the models used we get from inspiration, and more so, it's all about Ellen White. And some of these concepts, we have exactly anticipated them to fulfill the same way Ellen White puts them in her writings. One good example is the issue of the decree. In their history, they expected a decree. You go to 1850, it was a decree, the Fugitive Slave Act. I think we looked at that history. 1888, it was the Blair's Bill, a law. So 1 + 2, 3 was to be a what? A law. And that's where we ended into a trap. Because now it's becoming complex. How do we make this shift? And you can begin to see when you understand how it has been done, it challenges the aspect of the decree. You come to the same mark of the beast, image of the beast, church and state, persecution of God's people. All these events, we need to review and revisit them and understand them in the perfect light for us to see how they are fulfilled. If it's about church and state, I spoke about it recently, more clarity that to necessarily not be a church entity. The aspect of a woman riding on a beast, you need to ask yourself, who is that woman? Because if you only want to factor in a church entity, you limit yourself into seeing this dispensation as a religious movement, Protestantism in America, yet it is not. So these are some of the concepts we need to revisit and expand our understanding. Coming back to my study, I was able to show that it is not a new phenomenon that was demonstrated by the issue of using calendation to come up with this. The issue of election, I also explained about it. And then I came to the second testimony that was used to emphasize on this concept, that this is the month of July, which is dealing with a Republican event, which is being used as the marker for the Sunday law. And I gave a second testimony, the period of the 10 years. And progressively I've demonstrated that we were all along, there are many events that took place on these waymarks. But when you separate layers, you can have a good storyline that helps you understand that the major events we marked on this event, on these waymarks, were all dealing with the Republican issue. So when you come to here and say Republican, we were able to see, we should be able to see it's a threading of a story. It's not an independent event here. It's actually a complete work of organization that we marked beginning in 2014. And all these other Sunday laws lies within the same framework. The priests, the Levites, the Nethinims, now the 144,000. So, and then I was able to show how progressively this issue has escalated, how the Republican Party has had challenges to reform itself. 2019 is one of the examples. There is some impeachment proceedings, a lot of condemnation, but they are not willing to betray their leader. There is an election here which leads to an insurrection where their candidate loses the election and they need to flash back what went wrong. And this when they come up with a strategy to put everyone on board. So despite Trump having over 30 cases of felony, despite Trump orchestrating an insurrection which requires action, he should be in prison. There was abundant evidence. They are still willing to nominate him as their candidate because they still think he's the character they would use to achieve their goals. So in our next class, I think we'll pick from here. I think it's over, you know. So I invite you for a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for the wonderful moment. Thank you for giving us this chance to come and study together as we try to learn and understand the events today and how the prophetic significance each of us help us to have the eyesight to see things as we do it. We still have more time to discuss. Be with us even for the upcoming classes and until the end of the day. I pray this in Jesus' name.